administrative professionals, and welcome to the Admin Spotlight behind the front desk. I am your host, Molly Denham, and welcome to our second week of Administrative Professionals Month. This month, we are hosting special weekly podcasts where we turn the tables and talk with executives and get their perspective on the admin field and our future. We're talking to executives across multiple industries and talking to them about the value that we can provide to an organization and the challenges facing our career field as the business world changes. And our guest today is the amazing Dr. Colleen Shogan. Dr. Shogan served as the 11th Archivist of the United States, the first woman in American history to lead the National Archives. Prior to becoming Archivist, Dr. Shogan was Senior Vice President at the White House Historical Association, worked in the United States Senate, and served as a senior executive at the Library of Congress and its Congressional Research Service. She is the 2024 recipient of the American Political Science Association's Hubert Humphrey Award for Outstanding Public Service. And Dr. Shogan now serves as a senior advisor at More Perfect, where she leads In Pursuit, which is a nationwide civics project for 2026. She's a senior fellow in Civics Education at Stand Together and an adjunct professor of government at Georgetown University. And she also serves on the board of the U.S. Capitol Historical Society. Whew, it's so many projects on
A
your
lot of
plate these
projects,
days.
yes.
I am just so thrilled to have you with us today, Dr. Shogan. Welcome to the Admin Spotlight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, much of your expertise and experience directly crosses into what I consider a core competency of the administrative field, which is records management. And in that vein, today, I'm hoping to walk through some of your thoughts on administrative professionals as what I would consider maybe stewards of organizational memory and information integrity and institutional continuity. You've had such a distinguished career across government, history, and public service, and now continuing your work in civics education and national initiatives. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd love to start by giving our audience a bit more insight into your journey. Can you share a bit about your career path and what ultimately led you into the world of archives, records, and public service?
Well, thanks for that question. I mean, I'm a political scientist by training, so I was trained as an academic, and my first job was actually teaching at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. And quite frankly, I thought I would remain in that field in academia for all of my career. But then I took a detour. I left academia for a year to do a fellowship in the United States Senate with the American Political Science Association, where you take a year off, you go and work in Congress to understand how Congress works. And quite frankly, then my career just took a totally different path. And as you mentioned in your kind introduction to me, then after I worked in the Senate. Then I went to work at the Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress. Then I worked in senior leadership at the Library of Congress, the institution writ large. Went from there to the White House Historical Association, which is a nonpartisan nonprofit that's
Mhm.
affiliated with preserving the history of the White House, but not a federal position in itself. And then back to the federal service at the National Archives before coming here to More Perfect, which is once again in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, well, your experience is just exceptional and it's truly one of a kind. I don't know that we would find anybody with such a varied background because it spans such a unique intersection of history, policy, and information stewardship. And one of the reasons I was especially excited to speak with you today is because the administrative field is on the cusp of another evolution within the business community. AI, technology advances are really changing how business is physically conducted. And we, as a career field, are directly tied to that environment and we have to change with it. And I will admit, and I will date myself a little bit, I've been through these evolutions before, and we have not done a very good job as a career field in the past of, molding that future. And so we have to better define administrative operations. And I believe that records management and information organization are core competencies, and they're quite frankly underappreciated or maybe not fully understood in terms of their broader impact. Do you see administrative professionals as part of that broader ecosystem of safeguarding institutional memory? And if so, where do you think we may have the greatest impact in changing how businesses view the value of the records management lifecycle?
Well, I mean, in the positions, a lot of the positions that I held in the federal government, executive assistants were integral parts of records management. The executive assistants that I worked with actually helped me with my records management because it was required by the federal government.
Mhm.
In the federal government, it's at agencies, usually people that are a certain seniority level, all of their records or records that are key for documenting the decisions that were made are then mandated to be part of the nation's federal records. And
Mhm.
so, for example, when I was at the Library of Congress, I worked very closely with my executive assistant who was trained in records management and helped me understand which records would need to be preserved, what
Mhm.
records could be part of my own records so that I understood what was happening, but even, more importantly than that, what records would be part of the records management for the entire institution for the Library of Congress. So I really think, I mean, it's this is a component, whether you're in the federal system where it's required or whether you're in a job that is not affiliated with the federal government, but you're doing it as a mechanism of a good practice.
Mhm.
You do need to have a serious discussion as an executive with your EA support about what type of records management are we putting in place. A good example of that would be, I would think, would be personnel records and hiring
Mhm.
records, performance evaluations, things like that are critically important to how those are going to be managed, what is the security in which those are managed within a person's office or their office situation. And then also for continuity of operations, because people don't, I mean, let's face it, people don't stay in jobs forever.
Right.
They may leave unexpectedly, or in some cases, there's a planned retirement. And how can a person that is able to come into that job, whoever's going to replace you, or even if the position is being restructured in some way, you need to figure out some way in which to have continuity of operations. So you're not calling up that person
Mhm.
every 5 minutes and asking them what they did. You need to have access to files and records. And in many of the jobs where I was taking over someone else's position, it was very helpful to have access to those records and files so that when I was being asked to make a decision, I wasn't making it, in a vacuum, that I had the contextual information that I
Mhm.
needed for that particular issue.
I think you're right. And one of the things that we don't always talk about, and you touched on a little bit, is the risk, right? What is the risk of poor record keeping, lost information, lack of documentation? Because there could be consequences. In the business world, it's not the same as the federal government, where you have mandated law requirements to keep records. But if in the business environment, if you don't keep them, there could be operational or legal risks associated with poor records management. But from your experience with both sides, then, what are the risks organizations face when information isn't properly managed or preserved?
Well, I think you risk inefficiency at one level because if the records aren't preserved and they're not there for someone in a continuity situation, or if it's even just the same person. I mean, I can't, especially when I was served as the Archivist of the United States, some days I would have 8 to 10 meetings in one day, and
Mhm.
multiply that by 4 to 5 days a week. There's no way that, a few weeks down the road that I could remember the details of everything that happened, in a meeting that I had 2 Wednesdays ago at 2:30 in the afternoon. I mean, there's just a limit to the amount of information
Mhm.
that your brain can process, the number of people that you can actually remember. And if you're not going to try to reinvent the wheel every time, you better have good records management to be able to then, when you do need to go backwards and remember what that person said, or remember what the context was of
Mhm.
that meeting or that decision, or what was the memo that prepared you for that meeting, so that you can then go forward to the next step. If you don't have that records management in place, you're going to make actually a poor decision, or it's going to be very inefficient to try to figure out that information.
Mhm. And that's so important, especially because, organizations are becoming more complex, more data heavy. AI and technology advances are all great, but there's so much going on. And unfortunately, what we have seen, at least, in the administrative field, is the lack of resources and the lack of funding for administrative, operational tasks and responsibilities, records management being one of them. And it seems like there's an opportunity here, anyways, for the administrative profession to better position itself, maybe not as support, or task oriented, but more strategic oriented
Yes.
by becoming and contributing to continuity, knowledge preservation, and the decision making cycle. We can now have an opportunity to better put ourselves into the decision making cycle so we can speed it up. We can make decisions, a little bit better for the executive. What do you think needs to change for organizations to more fully recognize and maybe invest in that aspect of the administrative role?
Well, I mean, executive assistants, yeah, they're not. I think for executive assistant to have his or her best value, it is exactly the way you described it. They have to be invested and understand and be part of the mission. They're not
Mhm.
just parts of the organization or components of the organization that check tasks off a list to do in a particular day. They are a force multiplier in an
Mhm.
organization, not just someone who's fulfilling a particular function or perspective. So I think that it could be part of the challenge could be that some people are making the decisions, executives at certain levels, and they have not experienced what it's like to have a force multiplier as an executive assistant to work with them. And if they haven't had that experience, then perhaps they are less readily aware to in order to invest in that type of person for other types of roles.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think it's really critical and key to have people in those positions that have had those type of experiences to understand that the role is extraordinarily strategic in nature, as you
Mhm.
mentioned.
Yeah, we're gonna step away for just a minute, and I'm curious that I'm sure you have worked with many administrative professionals over your career. When you think of those exceptional admins that you worked with and that worked for you directly as an executive, how did they bring value? What was it about either that one or two particular individuals that just pop into mind that they did that was above and beyond that really supported you the way you needed it?
I mean, I think there's a level of being able to manage the details that can be very, very difficult when you have a lot of information flowing in and out on a given day or a given week. So that's extraordinarily important, just to have someone who has that talent and the ability to do that. But even beyond that, I think that a talented executive assistant professional will then be able to look at for example, it's not just someone who schedules you. That, I mean, yeah, that's
Mhm.
part of it. I mean, that is certainly a component of it, but it's more strategic than that. It's looking at the schedule for any given day, any given week, even any given month, and then being able to say, okay, this is the sequence of the meetings that need to be taking place. This is how we have to protect the executive's time in this instance. How are we going to save time on her calendar to make sure that she's able to get the things done that she needs to get done during the day,
Mhm.
in addition to spending time with other people in the organization or external people who need to come and meet with her. So it's someone who's actually is there not just to really dole out your time, like but someone who is able there, who is able to understand also it's going to be different for every person, but understand what that individual executive's capacity is
Mm-hmm.
for meetings or what they need to get done in any given day, and what some of their limitations and challenges are, and the ability to be able to say no for that person, right?
Mm,
And
yes.
do so in a way that is, of course, polite and gracious. Then in some cases doesn't narrow off the possibility
Mm-hmm.
of maybe some sort of relationship or partnership coming down the road, but it's just not able to happen at this time. And having the demeanor to be able to do that in a way that represents the executive in a positive light.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought all that stuff up because those are the things that our career field is that we're talking about now and how we can change our field to better fit the future needs of executives. And obviously, the big churn is AI and advanced technology. And there's been articles out there written that, AI is going to come along and the administrative field is not going to be necessary any longer. What are your thoughts as far as AI and technology, how it's going to change the business world, and specifically how that may change what we as administrative professionals can do to still provide value to the organization?
Right. And I think that as an EA, there will be uh, technology developments, just like for anybody, even for myself, adapting to the use of AI. And there's certain things that I will be able to use AI to help me accomplish that I wasn't able to use before, which should really free up my time to do things that AI can't, necessarily do for me. And I think the same thing for an EA. It could be down the road that scheduling requests and travel bookings and certain
Mhm.
maybe reimbursement receipts, things like that, will be able to take advantage of using AI to be able to help accomplish those tasks a lot quicker than what you can do now. But
Mhm.
that does not mean that administrative professionals will be, eliminated, I don't think, for high performing executives, because
Mhm.
there's a for me at least in most of my roles, my executive assistants and professionals really sat right outside my office. It's kind of mostly an in-person type of job for a lot of the jobs that I had. And the EA was the first person that talked to someone that was coming into the office or the office suite area, helping to figure out, to greet that person, to talk to them, also keeping everything moving on time. Is actually the first face in some ways of the organization that someone will encounter when they come into an
Mhm.
office setting. So, I mean, AI can't replace any of that. And the executive working, I think, with the EA has to determine what will be that approach for either the organization, the office, the agency. And by working together, then you can really create the culture of
Mhm.
how people are received into the office, how they're treated, when they leave, the promptness
Mhm.
of which meetings take place, keeping the schedule, keeping things on time, all of those functions that are done in tandem between the executive and the EA are things that will continue to be necessary. And then I would say that, even to go a step further,
Mhm.
is that in all kinds of executive level situations, there's always going to be, moments, days,
Mhm.
hours of ambiguity. Like how,
Mhm.
this is an unusual situation. We hosted two first ladies of the United States in my office when I was the Archivist of the United States. That's on a normal day, right? In the office, when a first lady of the United States is coming into the office
Mhm.
and is going to be there, and you really need to have that trust
Mhm.
with your administrative professional, your EA team, so that you're working together to make sure that, for example, that visit goes as smoothly as possible.
And I love the two words that you used because it's something that we in our field are trying to really hammer home, and that is one, we are a team, right? The executive and the EA, it's such an interesting relationship, but it really is a team relationship, and there has to be trust between the two, right? When you and your executive assistant are just working in tandem, there's a sweet spot that you
Right.
eventually get to, right? And that just comes with time. But what advice would you give a new EA going to a new, to a new executive when they are first starting their relationship? What are some of the things that they can do to help foster that trust and that relationship that everybody wants to get to?
I think you have to have a lot of communication back and forth. I mean, really, my EA was the first person that I saw in the morning, and one of the last people that I would see in the evening, or there would be a checkout point where the EA would say, "Okay, it's time." Maybe I was staying later, and the EA was going to go home, but that didn't mean that there wasn't like a checkout. Discussion
Mhm.
at the end of the day. And of course, there's a lot of communication as the day goes on. So I would say if you're starting a new job assignment with someone that you haven't worked for previously, spending as much time as possible with that person and having open and honest communication. And if something doesn't go right, particularly whatever it is, then having, asking for, hey, can we have 5 minutes? Either, today if you have time or tomorrow morning when you come in, that we can go over what could I have done differently? What could have we done differently?
Mhm.
Where did I miss? Where did I miss how you operate? Because it is, it can be challenging to develop that working
Yes.
relationship, and
Mhm.
you do have to come up with a rhythm in which to understand how you work together. But once that rhythm is established, I found that some of my closest working relationships were with my executive assistants. And I can say this, I am in touch with all of my executive assistants, former executive assistants. I go out to lunch with them at times and I
Mhm.
see them. I send, holiday cards to them. There are people that I keep in touch with on a regular basis because they knew in some ways more about my life and what was going on with my life than some of the senior executives
Mhm.
that even worked
Yeah.
alongside me or worked for me. And
Mhm.
that's just sort of the nature of the relationship.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Dr. Shogan, before we wrap it up, because and you have been so kind with your time today, and I do appreciate it. I have a final question for you. This podcast, like I said, is listened to by mainly administrative professionals who are deeply invested in their careers and always thinking about how to grow. And we talked a lot about the future today. If you are advising someone in our field, especially someone who's interested in in strengthening either their expertise in records management or information management or relationship building, what would you encourage them to focus on for the future?
Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of different professional development that you're able to engage with. I would not be shy of getting training in artificial intelligence and
Hmm.
technology because that's going to change the field. It doesn't mean, once again, that it's going to get rid of the field or remove jobs, but you are going to be expected to know how to work with that technology and how that will relate to various applications that you
Hmm.
use routinely in your job. And then the other thing I would say is if you're lucky enough to be at an organization that's maybe not super small, that has maybe many different executive professionals, administrative professionals in it, try to find someone who has worked in that organization longer than you, and maybe that could be, it could be a year, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years, but try to find someone who has some a little bit more longevity and seniority than you, and that people seem to respect, right?
Hmm.
That people seem to have a positive, view of his or her work, and then spend some time with that person. And I know the time is very short and it can be very, very difficult, but try to figure out if there's time that you can schedule a coffee with that person or a lunch with that person or a breakfast, or even if you have to before work or it's after work, if you can squeeze a half hour in, if that's the only time. Because mentoring, I would think, in a
Hmm.
profession that is so heavily dependent on relationship building and some of the soft skills that I
Hmm.
would say, the softer skills that we have, not always the hard skills. That is going to be really important to have someone who can serve a little bit of that mentorship function for you.
I'm so happy to hear you say that because we as administrative professionals we often feel um, you know apart from everybody else because sometimes you're the only admin in the office or even the only admin in the company, and so it can
Right.
be polarizing sometimes to and you feel like you're the only one there. So finding somebody to be your mentor is truly important.
You can also use a professional association if you are the only, EA in the company or in that area. Find a professional association and ask if they have a mentorship program or if someone can help you, with that. And it doesn't even have to be in your proximity. It could be via Zoom. It could be, like we're talking today.
Right? Isn't technology great?
It is great. It is. It's terrific.
So, Dr. Shogan, this has been incredibly insightful, and your perspective really brings a new dimension to how we think about the administrative profession and the role it plays in the future, especially when it comes to preserving information, that integrity and continuity of organization. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Molly.
Absolutely. And thank you, my fellow admin professionals, for tuning into the Admin Spotlight behind the front desk. Please continue to join us throughout Administrative Professionals Month, as each week we look through the executive lens and bring you conversations that challenge how we think about our role and where we can go in the future. We will talk again soon.